So I'm Jennifer. I'm a senior Macintosh desktop engineer for a credit union, which I also translate into the only full-time desktop engineer at a credit union. But thankfully, actually, I do have one other engineer on my team who works for both the light and dark side simultaneously. I probably couldn't live without and still keep my sanity. So hi, Ryan, when you watch the video, thank you. So welcome to Security Matters, making InfoSec your friend. Today we're going to talk about why we need friends in InfoSec, or information security, how do we get those friends, and what can we learn from our new friends. But first, why should you care about what I'm going to talk about? Well, security issues are going to happen whether you really like them or not. And my slides hate me already. That's awesome. Anyway, security is going to happen whether you like it or not. At some point in time, someone in your organization is going to say, hey, I've been reading about this Flash vulnerability or this malware, and do we protect against that? And why not? And someone, probably who has no idea how to use a Mac, will also say, hey, I know how to do that. Let's do this way. And you're going to be given this awful mandate and have no idea what you're doing, or because they have no idea what you're doing. So my philosophy is to do it first and get it done right the first time, and that way you're ahead of the curve all the time. So why information security? When I was researching for this session, I came across a white paper from FireEye Incorporated, they're a security company, and it says, today, most security architectures comprise a mismatch of different tools from a range of vendors, each focused on a single piece of the security puzzle. Because if they're not integrated, many security teams miss attacks that unfold over multiple threat vectors, such as email and the web. Excuse me. If we change that around a little bit, it answers my question pretty well. Why do we need friends in InfoSec? Well, today, most companies compromise a mismatch of different teams, each focused on a single piece of the puzzle. Because they're not integrated, many teams miss issues that unfold over multiple threat vectors. And you can just insert whatever your company does for the threat vector there. So that's my first reason. It's because teams need to work together. You need to have communication, or you're not going to be able to accomplish anything. Apple gives me my second reason. Their developer documentation reminds us that you cannot bolt security on at the end of the day. You have to consciously design it. It has to be a part of the process from the very beginning. And this applies through implementation, through testing, and release. And it doesn't matter if you're an app, if you're a service, if you're a company, regardless, you need to be aware of this the whole time. So, how do you make friends? It's a kind of difficult thing. I think maybe anyone with a toddler has struggled to answer that question, maybe with their kids. Don't hit them with things usually is good advice. The internet has some good advice, so I thought I'd share that with you. This one is about super glue. It would probably work. As an adult, we struggle a little bit extra, so this kind of applies as well. This next one's actually my favorite, just because I love the book, so that would really work for me if someone was like, hey, I love your favorite book. Okay, best friend. You can even use science. My friend, Sheldon Cooper, PhD, says that he's isolated the algorithm for making friendships. And I'll zoom in a little bit on there for you. At the end of the day, no one can really tell you how to make a good friend. But hopefully, at least what I can tell you is how to maybe communicate with your InfoSec folks, your security people, or even other people in your companies. And then you'll have good communication with them, and the friendship part will maybe come naturally, or at least you won't be enemies. So what do we learn from our new friends? The easiest way really is to just ask. And so when I was getting ready to do this, I was trying to think of how I could kind of express that to everybody. So I did. I asked 4 security professionals what their teams were concerned about, if there's anything that they felt I, or systems admins, engineers in general, really weren't paying enough attention to. And they all came from a really different place in their answers. There was overlap, of course, but I thought it was really interesting the way things were set up. So the first one was dealing with the operating system. The second one was the hardware. The third person talked about networking, and the fourth person was talking about hacking and exploits and vulnerabilities. Each of these people have a different expertise, and so it's really good to be able to kind of understand things from multiple points of view. There is overlap, both in their opinions and what they do in their jobs, and that's natural, so we don't miss anything. I'm going to go through them individually, but hopefully you'll be able to see that by addressing one of these concerns, sometimes we're actually able to address multiple of them at the same time. Okay, so Stacy was first. Her main focus is on the operating system. She is concerned with your basic OS hardening. She wants this thing in front of her to be as secure as possible, not really concerned about the network and other things that might be going on, but this individual device. So the first thing that she brought up was the root account. I'm pretty sure everyone in here could give me a good reason not to enable root access. Anyone know why you don't enable root access? You're supposed to all be raising your hands, but anyway. Just don't do it is the easy answer, of course. It seems intuitive. It seems like this is something we should all already know, but it's always good to remind ourselves because root has this ability to really mess up your entire system. And so this is always kind of ask yourself, do I really need this? Does anyone really need this? Is there any reason why using sudo isn't good enough? Do I want to give a user control so much so that when they make a typo, they're going to destroy my operating system? Probably not. As a side note, if you're using the new operating system, if you're on LCAP, we know that they've made a lot of changes to the power of root with SIP and those changes. And really, I'm going to point you to that guy over there. He gave a lovely presentation on that on Tuesday. If you didn't watch it, you should have. But you can watch him on video, and he can tell you all about how root is different now. But for those of us that maybe haven't upgraded or anything, we still have to remember. It's not even really remembering, because it's off by default, so just don't turn it on. Okay. The next thing Stacy brought up was guest access. And she actually brought it up in a way that I hadn't thought of before. I don't want other people on my computer. I don't want them taking my stuff. Of course. But guest users can't make changes, and they can't remotely log in. All their passwords are deleted as soon as they log out. So I thought that was pretty safe. But what she mentioned was that by just allowing someone onto your computer, you've opened yourself up to someone doing basic reconnaissance and possibly trying to do some privilege escalation attacks in order to take control of your system. So if someone needs to use your computer, they should probably be a trusted person enough that they can have their own account or their own computer and not let someone who's maybe trying to do some social engineering and just get in, see what your network looks like, see what your system setup looks like. Oops, my bad. So again, and that applies to both logging in and file sharing for guests. You have those same concerns there. Our next thing, Stacey talked to me about passwords. There is no quick, easy, dirty fix for passwords. You need good passwords. You need complex passwords. If your setup's anything like mine or any of the ones I've ever worked in, they actually have nothing to do with password requirements. They're always mandated from above. They're controlled by something else. Mine are controlled by AD. But what you can do is you can support them. And it might be as simple as just telling your users what the password requirements are. You might want to rewrite that before you show it to them, just saying. Okay, reporting to Apple and developers. She got me again on this one. I really kind of started to feel like an idiot at the end of some of these conversations with my friends. I realized how much I really didn't know. I knew location services reported back to Apple. and I guess in theory I knew that Spotlight was doing it too, but I didn't realize the extent of what was happening. I don't know how well the little type is going to show up, but if you click in the Spotlight system preference pane and then go to About, this is the information that you get. And it says not only is your information going to be sent back to Apple, location services, and Spotlight searches, but searches for common words and phrases will also be forwarded to Microsoft. I didn't like that. They are kind enough, however, to tell you how to make it stop. And that's the next paragraph. And they tell you how to go in and turn off these settings so that you don't have to be stuck with them. Okay, her last one, visible file name extensions. This one was kind of fun. The easiest way to understand this one is to really just look. So while preparing this keynote, I was looking for a nice picture, and this is 100% true. I went on Google image search, I downloaded this picture of a meme that I thought was kind of funny, and I ended up with this file, just unknown. So if I'd had my file extensions turned on, which is my recommendation, however, I clearly wasn't doing it at the time, it would have looked like this. And I'd have said, okay, it's a JPEG. That's probably what it looks like. So I'm feeling a lot more confident that what I've downloaded is what I actually wanted, and I'm safe to open it. Having the file extensions visible allows the user to identify the file type and sometimes the application it's associated with. And it can help lead you to a quicker identification of malicious files or misrepresented files. And hopefully that translates to less problems for you down the line. Take a look at these four that I messed with. So they look pretty normal. We've got a document, a web page, a screenshot, it's a PNG, and a funny meme, which is going to be the JPEG. But when I open them, I now have 4 quick add installers. Had I been using file extensions, it would have been a lot easier to immediately figure out that something weird was going on. Because now I can see that this says Safari update.pkg, screenshot.pkg. I'm not going to click on anything that says screenshot.pkg. That's just weird. And so this, for us probably, we have a better ability to notice these things and figure out something's going on. This is a benefit to your users because they don't always know what they're looking at and what they're looking for. But if they know enough to say, okay, a DMG or a PKG or this is going to install something, or maybe they know that they don't want to open anything that's exe. If they can see that part, then they know something wrong is going on. And while that exe isn't going to do anything, it's probably a hint that something weird has been going on their computer, or they've been on some really strange websites. So, implementation. How do we follow through and actually get these things done? Well, you can always write yourself a script. We can go from really complicated scripts to really easy scripts, whatever we would like. Send it on over to the JSS. Guest user, file extensions, root access, all those things I just mentioned, they all have defaults, read and write commands, just an easy switch to turn them on and off so you can easily verify or change your settings. You can go into the GUI, and this is, now it is at least, how you can turn off the Spotlight suggestions. And by the way, you would be forgiven, and hopefully that means I was forgiven, for thinking that I turned off all the stuff going back to Apple and going back to Microsoft and anyone else by turning it off in Spotlight system preferences, but I didn't. You actually have to go into Safari preferences and turn it off again. So I clicked that too early, but anyway. So we can do those basic things, these things that we're used to doing, but this is JNUC, and we hopefully all have a JSS, and so there's a better way to do it. And that's using configuration profiles. These are some of the things that you can do with configuration profiles. 26 settings of predetermined entries are already in your JSS to use as templates. And they're just XML files that you're modifying, so you can just throw in as many other ones as you'd like. It's really simple to use these and to make them. I'm hoping most of you guys have seen this page before or familiar with it. This is restricting items in system preferences. This is actually a real one that I used. And it blacklists the things I want to block instead of an older method that whitelisted the ones I wanted to allow. Because when your creative people want to use those Wacom tablets, they have their own system preference panes. And if all you've done is whitelist, then you can't make that thing work, and it's really annoying. So just turn off the ones you don't want. It's a little easier. But this one profile checked off 6 things for my to-do list for my security list of things I wanted to accomplish. So it was really easy. If you are curious about what's happening, this is what it looks like. I downloaded it and opened it up in Xcode, and that's my XML page. You can see I've highlighted the part that says login window just so I knew which one I was looking at. They're not really easy to read. Hopefully, the only time you're going to need to see this is if maybe you're troubleshooting, something's gone wrong, maybe the admin before you doesn't know how to write anything down and you have to kind of guess what they've been doing. That's when these things will help you out. Maybe you get something to make it a little easier to read. But for our purposes, I'm going to stick with the friendly version. So this is the same profile I just showed you in the XML. This is just back in the JSS again. And I told you before there were 26, 27 categories of templates. There's 22 customizable keys inside this one login window category. There's really a lot of stuff in here. So I have this set to show text on the login window, show the local users and mobile accounts, and disable automatic login. So again, I've checked off another 5 or 6 things that my security team is concerned about, and I did it in about 3 or 4 minutes. Okay, moving on to my friend George. George was very concerned about hardware. He's actually the first person I talked to, and I was kind of wondering why he was concerned about hardware and not the operating system, but then I talked to Stacy, so it all worked out. So his first thing is firmware of EFI. Without a firmware and password in place, anyone with physical access to your machine can access the boot menu. And they can then boot off their own system and circumnavigating all that stuff we just spent all of our time with Stacy doing, and it makes it all kind of pointless. And they also have the opportunity, if you're not encrypting your data, to steal your data, which is why encryption is item number 2 on George's list. Encryption is built into our operating system. If you're using a Mac, you have a step up on the Windows team. I just did encryption at work a few months ago. I clicked a few buttons and said, okay, I'm ready to pilot. And the Windows team spent like 6 months and said, I think maybe this software works. So has anyone not heard of FileVault? Just checking, it's there. There's some lovely websites. This same guy over here, too, he also knows a lot about FileVault. I will admit to learning most of my FileVault from his website, so it's quite helpful. But it's full disk, full volume encryption. It's protecting your data at rest, and it's preventing someone who has physical access to your machine from getting your data. And that's really important, especially important. I work financial institutions. We're talking member data, we're talking social security numbers, credit card numbers, bank account numbers, all kinds of stuff, and we do not want anyone getting that. I would rather have your computer turn into a paperweight once it's been stolen or accessed than have anyone get to that data, because that's what's really important to me. And when I did my FileVault rollout, I had a lot of people complain. I don't want to do this, it slows my computer down, blah, 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 blah. But when I went up to them and asked them why, I got not a single answer. Which I said, okay, fine, have FileVault, have a nice day. Because there's not a good reason not to enable it. It's not doing anything to your system that's going to bother you. Especially if you've switched to solid-state drives, it boots up just as fast as it would without it. Once you get past that initial turning it on, you don't even know it's there. Okay. The last two things that he brought up were, they fall in a similar category. So it's USB ports and Bluetooth. And technically, I guess Thunderbolt ports are going to apply here as well. Because, again, it's all about data. File sharing or file stealing becomes quite a big risk when anyone can just walk up to your machine, plug in a USB or Thunderbolt drive, and connect to your system. So we don't want to do that. My company is very concerned with not letting people be able to just kind of wander around and have USB access. We had to figure out how to turn that off. Bluetooth can be used for file sharing as well. It's also particularly susceptible to a set of security vulnerabilities involving identity detection and location tracking. It's vulnerable to denial of service, unintended control and access of data and voice channels, as well as unauthorized device control and data access. There's a lot of interesting stuff going on with tracking someone by their Bluetooth, maybe setting up a beacon when they come in somewhere and then they're active and someone's trying to access their phone and access their data. I was reading some really kind of scary things about it, frankly. So if you don't need it, just turn it off. Okay, implementations. Well, the first thing we had was firmware passwords. You can set up a JSS policy for that. You could implement a script if you're interested in maybe changing up your boot order or doing something like that. That would be after your firmware password's in place. But to put it in place, very simple. The rest, I'm going to go back to my favorite toy, configuration profiles. You can use a policy or a configuration profile to enable FileVault and manage the keys. You can turn off Bluetooth pairing or the entire system preference pane. And you can keep drives for mounting under the restrictions category. And I don't have a picture of it, but that's actually, I know I said configuration profiles are my favorite thing, but this is my favorite thing in configuration profiles. Instead of turning off a USB port or a Thunderbolt port and then blocking access to, say, printers or charging your iPhone or your external display, you can instead block drives from mounting. So the setting in the configuration profile stops drives from mounting, and that's going to include drives that you've plugged in and DMGs. So if you download a DMG, then they can't, user can't open it. I thought that was really cool because I don't like it when people try and download a drag and drop kind of application, maybe put it on their desktop and run it from there since they don't have access to applications. If you use DMGs a lot in your organization for some reason, you'll probably get really annoyed with that setting. I don't recommend it, but it worked for me and I kind of liked it. All right. Mindy. Mindy works in telecommunications and network security, and she talked to me about cloud access, because cloud is the future, and it's this big thing that hovers over here somewhere, and I don't really know what it is. The problem with the cloud is all back to data again, okay? It's not secured on your network. Every vendor is going to have different layers of security, and so depending on who you are and what you need to secure, it's going to make a really big difference. If you're, just Joe Schmo and you want to throw some pictures up on the cloud to save and send to your mom, that's great. You don't need a really sophisticated level of security. But if you're trying to run a Fortune 500 company and send internal memos back and forth and have schematics for patents and buildings and different things, it kind of makes a much bigger difference. But again, it really varies between organizations. So I can't really tell you to use it or not use it because it just, it's going to be different. But you want to make sure that you're looking at two places. You want to look at it at the client level and at the network level. And I'm going to come back to that with the implementation part. The next thing was browser plugins. According to Adobe, more than 500 million devices are addressable today with Flash technology. And it's projected that there will be over 1 billion addressable devices by the end of this year, of 2015. More than 20,000 apps in mobile markets like the Apple Store and Google Play are built using Flash technology. Who thinks that's a good idea? Anyone? Well, it's not. And the problem is, More than 400 million connected desktops update to the newest version of Flash Player within 6 weeks of release. When I read that on their page, I felt like they were trying to brag. Like, it only takes us 6 weeks to get everybody updated. And I was like, 6 weeks? That's, ugh. Mindy sent me over to the CVE website, and I'm not expecting you to read all this, but this is September. This is actually only through September 22nd, because that's when I made this slide. So in 22 days, 23 Flash vulnerabilities were identified. 19 of them scored a 10, which was the max score for high and critical vulnerabilities. So if your users are waiting up to 6 weeks to update Flash, you have a problem. So your solution, either update or make it go away. The last thing she brought up was email attachments. A lot of things that are malicious and trying to attack your systems are going to come through email. And what you really need is an inline defense to try and protect from some of these things. A popular one she was telling me about is sending fake resumes. And so it looks, maybe you're in HR and it looks like someone's trying to send you some resumes and you're opening them up and now you've got malicious files and who knows what else is happening. There's not all that much that we can really do for that initial stopping it. We're on the client end, most of us, I think, and so we're not controlling our email systems, we're not our Exchange admins. But there is software that can be used and things that can be put in place to try and track that and to stop it before it actually gets to you. It is coming from that other end, like I said, but it's always good to be aware of all of these things that are happening around you. But your firewall, your email clients, those things that your network team is doing, those are going to help you. But something is always possible to come through. So remember those file extensions. It's not an active defense, but you can give your users more information. They can make a better decision about what they're opening on their system. So if they do get a bad file in email, but it's got file extensions on and they can identify it, hopefully they won't actually open it. Hopefully they'll call somebody. Okay, implementation. Now remember, Mindy works on the network team, and so her path for implementation is to block all the things. You don't need cloud? Turn it off. Don't need Flash? Turn it off. Worried about that email stuff? Okay, she didn't say turn off email, but she did say have that inline defense before it got to you. But you're not using ports? Turn them off. You got known ports that aren't in use. You don't need them? Turn them off. In reality, we can't just go around and turn everything else off. But what we can do is try and stop things as much as possible. So if we go back to talking about cloud access, we can look at our firewall settings, we can work with our network teams, look at our network ports, maybe turn off ones that are known to, I don't actually know if this is true, but say Google Drive has a specific port they're always using for outgoing traffic. If that's the only thing that uses that port and you absolutely do not allow Google Drive in your organization, now we can turn it off and block all the things. We also have cloud things that are built into the operating system, so it's important to make sure we follow through with those as well. But we're aware of them. They're in our operating system. The JSS is already aware of them. So configuration profiles, yay. You click that little button right there, iCloud, and no one can open iCloud. Pro tip, if they've already done it, they will not be able to take out their credentials either. So just check that first. And then we can use our JSS again, and we can restrict applications. And it didn't go. There we go. Restricted software applications. You can set that up, and it's pretty easy. All you need is the name of the application, or if you want to get really fancy, you can have the process name. And you have a lot of control here. You can do anything from simply notifying your users that this isn't something we're really interested in you doing, but we're not going to harm you, to just deleting it off your machine. And then every time they try and install it again, it'll just get deleted again. So you have a lot of granular control there. But this keeps people from using, even just trying to use an application that isn't allowed. I use Microsoft OneNote as an example. Some people really like this application in my organization. However, you can't open the Mac version without signing into the cloud. So it was absolutely pointless for me to use because we don't allow cloud access. So I took it off my machine, and I set this up so other people won't have to deal with that. Because it's really annoying when someone calls you and they're like, I can't get this application to work, and they spend 30 minutes with the desktop support team before getting to me, and I go, it doesn't work. Okay, Joe is the last person that I talked to about this security stuff. I was kind of going around, visiting my friends at their desks or at their offices or home, whatever. And Joe looks at things a bit differently than I do. She does penetration testing, ethical hacking, Apple security research, all that kind of stuff. And when I went to talk to her about, okay, well, you know this stuff, what should I be concerned about? Like, how do I stop these things? She literally brought out a big box of like a plastic tub of paperwork and research and information about exploits and things that you have. And I was really struck by this fact that this person, an IT person of her caliber, because this is a ridiculously smart person, was keeping all of their research in a plastic tub. I was a little scared. But what she does, really, is she looks for ways to break what other security professionals have created. These loopholes do exist. Nothing is perfect. And so it's her job to provide advice back for us, for me, for Stacy, George, et cetera, on how we can stop these things before they get to us. So I did go through some of her stuff and read it. For example, in 2008, researchers at Johns Hopkins discovered how to disable the LED on a class of Apple internal iSight webcams. So you could now enable video to be captured without any indication to be used, and it can all be done by an unprivileged user. Now, there's a 17-page PDF and a long video that was done as part of a security symposium in 2014. If you want to read all the nitty-gritty details, go for it. It'll be on the resources page at the end. I'm not going to go into all of that. But basically, they go in, they modify the firmware, and now they have control of your camera. That just freaks me out. I don't want people doing that to my computers. So is there really anything that can be done to help protect us from the hackers? And I said, Joe, please tell me I can stop this stuff. And she kind of looked at me and was like, no. This slide's blank for a reason. There's no switch you can flip. There's nothing you can do just to say, I'm always on top of every new exploit and every new threat. Like, ding, checkbox, and I'm done, and all new things that exist are going to be protected from. It's ridiculous, and it doesn't exist. What you have to do is you have to mitigate the threats as much as you can and stay aware. If someone does get into your system, hopefully, by following those solid security standards I've been talking about for a little while now, you've already prevented them from harming your system. So if someone got a hold of my laptop, but they can't actually boot it up, they can't get past the FileVault screen, they can't do that firmware thing to my iSight camera, so I'm safe. If root's disabled, they can't use it for privilege escalation. If the ports are blocked, they can't send your data back out somewhere. If it's encrypted, like I just said, they just can't get to it at all. So again, she's looking for the holes that Mindy, George, and Stacy have left, maybe because they weren't communicating with each other, which is kind of my theme here, and gives us this holistic view and ties all of our work together. So hopefully we can kind of all be together to fix that. Now, I talked about these vulnerabilities in Flash, for example, something that we already know about. And we don't know about everything, right? But we do know some things. And if you're not doing anything about the stuff you already know about, you are, as my team lead said to me, shooting yourself in the foot. Patch management. I know that this is just an evil, dirty word for some people. I followed lots of discussions on Jamf Nation and in Slack and IRC and Twitter, and people like to talk about it, and they like to argue about why their system is better, or sometimes they just like to tell you why all the systems are awful. So I'm not going to tell you how to do that. I'm not going to tell you how to manage your patches, because that's an entirely different, probably much longer session than this one is. But I am going to tell you that you need to do it. Don't care how, just do it, okay? If you don't have a patch cycle in place, create your own. I went into OmniGraffle and made one in 10 seconds. This is a very easy to follow, basic idea of what you should be doing with patch management. So a vendor comes out with something, you send it over to InfoSec, you make sure they approve it, it patches the thing they're concerned about. You package it up, throw it in your JSS, test it. You get a couple pilot users together, send it over, make sure it still works, make sure you didn't break whatever, anything really. And then you send it out to everybody else. You're done. Okay? So again, there are a lot of different ways to do this. This is like the bare bones version. But if you don't have something that looks anything like this, please fix that as soon as you get home. And then you make yourself a little pretty diagram, you send it out to everybody, you start implementing it, and then we all go home and have a drink. So, what are we learning from these guys? The whole point of me telling you guys all this and me showing you silly things about making friends at the beginning is that we need to make friends with our information security coworkers. We need a good working relationship with them. We do not want to be those people that they hate or call names. We don't want to be those like weirdo Mac people who really have no idea what's going on. And we don't want to think of them as the weirdo, maybe Windows people who have no idea what's going on, because that creates a lot of conflict. But you can go ahead and you can create your standards and your procedures. So if you start with them from the beginning, you have a lot more control about what's going on. Okay, so you tell them, this is what we can do on a Mac. This is what the JSS can help us with. This is what I can script to fill in the blanks for a couple of things. And then you can create your standards and create your baselines together. And as you go through, you can really see that you'll have the opportunity to create good strategies for your organization. You'll be able to hopefully see where problems are going to occur, where you've missed things in your communications, and help prevent them before you have an audit finding and before you have an impact on your customer. Your information security team in general is going to know what the risks are to the company. That's their concern. They're worried about things coming in from the outside. They're worried about blocking those ports. They are scared that Apple push notifications are going to do some weird voodoo to your system and mess everything up. It's not, by the way. But by working together with them, you can help get over that stuff. And but while they know it, or what they think they know at least, or for the company, you know how it's going to impact your users. You know that if we turn off push notifications, then maybe they're not going to get their alerts, or maybe they're not going to get those configuration profiles I just spent 5 hours making. So you want to be able to make sure that you can make the decisions instead of being stuck implementing something that's not going to work. You want to make sure that the decisions that are made are going to impact your customers in a good way and not a horrible way that causes them to go complain to your managers and then call you names, and etc. So that is actually it. So these are some resources, and I'm sure you can't read them because I can barely read them. I'm right behind them. There's a lot of really good information on this stuff out there. There's entire books that are written on security for Apple. Some are just personal people wrote them and put them up on GitHub, and then of course we have the professional ones, and we have NIST standards if you're working for government, and there are all kinds of things. So I've put some links up here, and I have a blog. It has maybe 2 users and 3 posts on it. But if you do want some of those links, I'll put them over there. That's the address, is the Quo Vadimus. That's my name online. So maybe I'll have 5 or 6 users after someone goes and clicks on the link. But yeah, they'll all be up there so that if you have interest in any of those things, you can get to it. So that is all. Thank you. Oh, I put the mic down. Sorry. Does anyone have any questions or anything? Rich, what's up?
So Do you have any suggestions on where they would go to look for security guidance for securing their own environments?
I like the center. So Rich asked, yeah. So Rich asked, what do I do if I don't have an information security team? How do we get started? I really liked the Center for Information Security. I don't know if that was on that slide, but I'll make sure that it is when I publish it. They have a benchmark standards guide, and it's community-driven and written by us, really. I'm sure there are people at this conference that are actually in there. You are. Or at least they think your blog on there. So yeah, there's a lot of really good standards, and they have different layers of how they write their stuff out. So like layer 1, layer 2, layer 3, depending on what you're looking for. And how much hardening that you really want to do. So I'd probably start there. And there's always like the NIST guidelines, but the last time I looked at one, it was on 10.6, so it's not that helpful. Yeah, so I'd probably start with the benchmark guide then.
A comment on guest access.
Yeah?
So when FileVault is enabled, guest access is a very different beast. It's not like it doesn't log in to the computer itself. It actually reboots into recovery mode and only gives you Safari access. And that actually becomes a honeypot, because if you're trying to find your lost Mac, using Find My Mac and Find My iPhone, you're encouraging the person who has it to connect to a Wi-Fi network. They have no access to the local disk because it's FileVaulted, and they've got it on the internet, and now it gets that wipe command or that it takes home.
Can everybody hear him? Probably not. So he was mentioning that if you have FileVault turned on, guest access actually acts a lot differently. And so you can turn guest access on with FileVault. It's not going to boot into your system. He said it's going to boot into the recovery drive, and it's only going to give you access to Safari. And so that's actually, it acts like a trap, a honeypot for a user if they've stolen your device to connect to Wi-Fi, and hopefully maybe check back in with your systems, and you'll be able to figure out where they are. Thank you. Yes?
Comment and a question. We found out the hard way that we've got about 13,000 iPads in our school district. We found out the hard way that staff accounts, we allow iCloud keychains. If you push out an SSID through a profile, they can go, if they've got iCloud keychain on their Mac, they can in clear text read your password that you've got hidden on the iPad that you're pushing out through a profile. So, and then your secure password is now
Right.
the open. So just something for those that don't know, that was a lesson we learned the hard way. My question is actually, we don't have a ton of Macs that apprehensive to take and utilize FileVault. Primarily because oftentimes for troubleshooting, if I've got issues, I've got a USB stick that's bootable, has a bunch of tools including like Disk Warrior and some other stuff on it. If you've got FileVault enabled, can you still boot to an external USB stick and gain access to the drive in order to run repairs?
Absolutely. His question is if you've got FileVault enabled, and he's doing something that I did a lot when I was going around to users' desks and stuff, which is to carry around a USB stick that's bootable and it has all your tools on it. And so the question is, can I still use that with a FileVault machine? And the answer is yes. So you can, if you have a firmware password on, like I mentioned, you're going to have to put it in to be able to boot off your new system. And then you're going to need a password to the encrypted drive. So on my setup, my hidden management account has FileVault access to all of our drives so that I can still boot the system. Like if someone leaves the company, I can just walk up to the desk, turn it on, and log in with my management account. And that's what I would do in that situation. When the drive mounts, it pops up and says, do you have a password for this encrypted disk? And if you do, then you put it in, it'll mount, and then you can run all your utilities the way you normally would. You just wouldn't, the only thing you won't have is access to that particular user's data, which is kind of the point. So we don't want access to that anyway.
I got a real quick question along what you just said there. You have a hidden management account that has FileVault access?
Sort of.
Okay.
I had a hidden management account, and then I enabled FileVault, and it's not so hidden anymore. Yeah, no, you can't. It shows all your login, all your usernames at the FileVault window, and you can't do it. If you do, though, if you log out and go back to your login window, it does look hidden again. You can't see the name, but you're right. When FileVault was turned on, my hidden account just suddenly appeared. But it's still my account with my management password on it. So, and I think I've just gotten used to saying hidden account at this point. Yes.
So, our users use USB drive for time machine backup.
Mm-hmm.
Is there a way to whitelist that drive? If you want to turn off USB access altogether, but say, allow this one?
I have no idea. I actually, my coworker that I mentioned earlier texted me, whatever, I don't know what day it is anymore. Sorry. Can you basically whitelist a particular USB drive to be allowed? So I have this drive that I want, and I want for Time Machine, I think, and for nothing else, I don't want anyone else's. That is something that can be done with Checkpoint, I know, on Windows machines. And so, like I said, he texted me the other day and said, do we do this? Can we do this? They really want to do it on the Macs. I said, well, I have no idea, and I'm at a conference. I'm not going to find out today. But I don't think you can. I think the last time I looked at Checkpoint's information, they could turn them off, but they weren't able to do those unique identifiers on it. But if anyone else knows,
You have to script it. You can set so that drives do not auto-mount when they plug in, and then you can require that you can have a script essentially that has quick access for mounting that drive after the fact, write your own whitelist.
right.
Sounds like a fun project, so maybe I'll do it. But
So check out his GitHub. He said that you could do it. You'd basically be doing it all on your own. You'd have to set drives to not auto-mount, and then you'd have to basically create your own whitelist. So it sounds like you could theoretically create your own system to do that, but it's not part of the configuration profiles I used. And like I said, it's been a little while since I looked at the Checkpoint stuff, but I don't think it was on their Mac client, only on the Windows client when that was. That was about 6 months ago, so they may have updated. Yeah.
That guest account most often shows up when you enable Find My Mac. Normally when you turn it off, that guest access goes back off. But I've also seen that triggered by NVM management that in some ways, triggering location services. So sometimes that guest account will just show up.
So Rich is giving us all a heads up that sometimes the guest account when you're using FileVault will just show up, depending on whether you're using Find My Mac, or some MDM solutions are doing it as well.
Yeah, the functionality hasn't changed. You still don't get access to the disk. You're still only going to Safari. But if you don't have Find My Mac enabled, that phone home thing isn't actually phoning home to anything.
Right. So in order for that trap to work, you have to have something enabled to actually phone home, basically. So otherwise, they're just going to be using Safari. Yes?
Just a follow-up question to that. If you have that guest mode access on and a firmware password set, can that system still boot to the recovery partition without that password? That's a dang good question. I haven't tested that.
The question was, if you have the guest account set up to boot into recovery, but you also have a firmware password, is it going to boot into that recovery partition? Do you have a question or an answer? Awesome.
for storage list, can you look at the actual way the FileVault 2 encrypts the volume? The recovery disk is not encrypted. So, yeah, I think that should be possible. That particular partition is encrypted.
That partition's not encrypted, but we're looking at choosing your boot volume with your firmware password, and so they wouldn't have that. Is it going to change your boot drive? Yeah. Yeah.
But when you choose the guest mode, in the background, unless it's running on startup manager. So if you blast the startup disk, it would move that startup program.
So it sounds like it's theoretically possible. It sounds like a nice, fun project for someone to write a blog post about. Yes?
If you block DMGs, does that affect your policies that are tracking small DMGs as well?
Absolutely. I think I wrote that and I skipped it. Yeah, so if you're blocking DMGs and you are using DMGs as installers with Casper, you are going to run into problems. And yeah, so for that, you can either turn them off, turn the profile back off, which would probably be annoying. You could, put someone in a group. Okay, they lose the profile and then they get their DMG installed and then they go back into the group, or maybe switch over to just a PKG, which is mostly what I've done. Yeah. Okay, so, okay, hopefully I'll repeat this right. That if you have Find My Mac enabled, the way it's stored in the NVRAM, it doesn't get erased basically when if you're re-imaging someone, maybe turned the computer back in, you're giving it to someone else, that original owner could still have the ability to actually go in and wipe the drive, right? So you should be on the lookout for that when you're imaging. Right, and sorry, I left that part out. And so, but there are scripts out there, as we all know, because half the thing, probably more than half the things I do are written by people in this room or this building. Find a script that can actually take care of that setting for you. So, yeah.
Do you allow boot camp, and if so, what do you do for encryption?
I do not allow boot camp, so no. Sorry, we don't. I'm actually working with a pretty small group of Macs for very specific purposes, like our creative people and video editors and stuff. They have no usage for Windows, and even the limited usage that they do have, we have a pretty robust VM environment, and so they just remote into a VM if they need something like that. So I haven't done anything with kind of how to deal with the encryption or any of that with a boot camp volume. So. Yeah.
You mentioned you disabled Bluetooth.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of Apple's modern convenience, like handoff and continuity, you find if it available to users or it just didn't come up, or if it did come up, how did you sort of smooth that over or tackle that problem of people that may want to use those convenience features?
So he asked, how do I deal with the fact that I've maybe turned off Bluetooth, turned off some of those really cool convenience features that come with the iOS now and communicate with your Mac and your iPhone or your iPad. And really the answer there is that that's what I wanted to happen. I know I work in a much more secure environment than I think a lot of people with Macs do. Like I mentioned before, we have social security numbers and bank account numbers and all those things. We have absolutely no interest in letting someone jump between a phone and their work computer, especially if it's their personal phone. We don't want them sharing that data back and forth. And so when Yosemite came out and continuity and handoff and all that came out, we don't allow it. We just don't allow any, you have to be signed into iCloud for that anyway, for most of those things to work, and we turn that off and don't allow it. I mean, if you're talking Bluetooth pairing for a mouse or keyboard and stuff, we do that, but we set that up, and then we set it so you're not pairing any other devices afterwards. But in terms of the phone and stuff, we felt that was a security risk, and so we wanted it turned off. But yeah, I think you probably would have issues with users if that was something you wanted to be using. I think the choice there is you just have to decide if that feature is worth the risk of having the Bluetooth on and make that decision for your own company. And then, just work within that decision. Yes?
Can you clarify how you have Bluetooth on compared with the mouse and keyboard?
Mm-hmm. We have file sharing for Bluetooth is off, and once we've paired it with a device, it's not discoverable anymore. That's how I have it. And then I have the preference pane is disabled, so users can't go in and try and do other things or try and re-enable. Yes. Yeah. And again, some of the things are just recommendations. The benchmark security thing that I mentioned when Rich asked for resources earlier, it says turn Bluetooth off, totally. And I'm sitting there with my wireless mouse and my wireless keyboard going, I can't interact with my computer to read your web page anymore. There's a layer of risk that we all have to take in deciding which things are important for us to secure and which things we're willing to do. And so it just comes down to what's important for your environment. If you're worried, the things with Bluetooth that I mentioned are like some location tracking type things that were a concern. So if you're in your building and that computer's not going anywhere and it's a secure building, I don't have a huge concern of someone using that Bluetooth vulnerability to access my users' computers. But if we're talking about a laptop or an iOS device that's going through 15 international airports and going into maybe an embassy or something, then I have the concern. And so then maybe telling my laptop user, no, you have to either use a wired mouse or the trackpad, you can't have your Bluetooth mouse, is worth it for me to just disable Bluetooth altogether. And again, it just becomes balance. And I think that's kind of what I'm going for here, which is that if you're communicating with your information security people, you become aware of where that balance is, and you know how to act. So if they know what you're doing and you know what they want, then you can say, okay, well, this user is doing X, Y, Z, so we need to keep an extra eye on him, and he's an exception. Whereas these users over here, she's fine, he's fine, she's fine. We just turned their stuff off, so we're not as worried about they're in like a lower risk category. So, yes, sir.
Are you blocking all of iCloud or just parts of it?
All of it.
So if you restrict the iCloud preference pane, can you just go to the accounts preference pane right next to it and set up your iCloud?
I've restricted the iCloud preference pane and the internet accounts preference pane, and my network team has also blocked access to the web interfaces as well.
I'm in the process of that project right now. So
Yeah.
I'm trying to figure it all out.
Yeah, and it actually came from that side. They deactivate, they block the ports, and so then people were trying to log in, and you can't. And at that point, it's just cleaner, really, to disable the system preferences than have people trying to make it work when you know it's not going to work. So, yeah.
So real quick question on the Bluetooth, because I'm going to be honest, it's been a little while since I've looked at the vulnerabilities. Is just turning off discoverable still enough to help obfuscate the fact that you have it? Or are there attacks around the not having a discoverable device?
I really don't know.
That's one thing we always did, so go discoverable, pair your device, turn discoverable.
Yeah, and that is what I'm doing. Right, and that is how most of mine are set up. I don't know if that's getting us around everything, and I haven't read like the most recent ones. If you want to see what kind of weird stuff people can do, go watch some DEF CON videos. They scare the crap out of me most of the time. Because I'm not worried about everyone walking around with an electronic device trying to like hack into my phone and stuff, and I never want to go to Las Vegas again. But yeah, I really don't know how up to date that is. So yeah. Yeah. I believe just doing the system preference pane is going to take care of it for you, because you might still get a prompt from the app, but yeah, I think I'd have to check. Off the top of my head, I'm pretty sure it does, but I don't want to say yes or no either way and then be wrong. Okay.
Anytime we try to add any of those features, the first thing it does is it opens up internet actions or internet account preferences to add the account there. We were kind of playing with that last night. So I think Jen's right that it's going to be blocked because it's trying to go to a preference.
Yes. Correct. Well, he's asked, what do I do if someone's Mac goes missing because I've turned off iCloud, which means I've turned off Find My iCloud or Find My Mac. And my answer is, they're all iMacs sitting on people's desks. Actually, I'm working on a laptop program right now, and that is actually something that we're looking at. And we're not quite sure how that's going to work out. So, but it's sort of the beginnings of a program, and so we haven't fully fleshed out all of those things yet. Okay?
The way it works for us is we actually end up going to the police because JSS gets the IP address of the guy. As long as they have an IP address, the police can go and request that location from the ISP. It's a very long process to handle, but that's one way of doing it.
Okay, so the answer was that if you've got Find My Mac turned off, but your system's still going to check into your JSS, you can get an IP address, you can get in touch with your local police, and go to the content provider, hopefully find a location that way.
Just say, Adriana Kelly delivered a session here 2 years ago, covering a stolen Mac in Casper, right? So we watched the session we did 2 years ago. She details the whole process that she was stolen. And she goes through all of that stuff on tracking it and what happened.
Awesome. So 2 years ago, JNUC right here, a great session on how to track a stolen laptop. So our friend in the front recommends you watch it. I guess I do too.
One more thing, so I think a guy here mentioned blocking some of iCloud as possible. In my research, I've actually wrote an extension attribute that shows that certain parts of iCloud are enabled or disabled. So we don't allow back to my Mac, for instance. So we just set up a smart group, and it becomes more of an HR process. So we have a smart group, and we have back my Mac enabled. We reach out to you and say, hey, no.
Yeah. So if you weren't hearing him, he was just saying another way to kind of deal with some of these concerns about what might be enabled, what might not be enabled, is actually to go the human route and track, use a smart group, a script, an extension attribute to figure out who's got what set up. But then if it comes into terms of this is something we don't allow in our environment, just get HR, just go to the user and tell them they have to turn it off, as opposed to trying to come from our side and force it off. So, yeah.
I think what points out about Back to My Mac is that it's using these ad hoc InfoSec sessions that are using random port numbers. And you had mentioned earlier the network section of ports, and a lot of us may not be blocking network traffic on firewalls. Do you have a particular list or a resource website where there's a list of ports to block? Not that you can do that for Back to My Mac.
I do, yes. I don't know what it is. I have a nice port list that I've referenced a lot of times, bookmarked, and I'll be happy to, when I post the resources, I'll be happy to add that in there. I'm gonna have to write that down soon so I don't forget, but yeah. Yes? Oh, I think I accidentally called on 2 people. Okay, balcony, and then I'll come back down.
You mentioned to restrict USB as a vector for attacks, disabling drives for configuration profiling. Is that what you're doing, or are you taking any additional steps to try to guard against firmware attacks?
Oh, through USB ports? So we asked if I'm taking additional steps to block like firmware attacks through USB ports. That's not something I've personally worked on. We've mostly concerned with file sharing and data loss. So it's been a question of keeping files from moving onto USB ports and such. And by blocking them from being mounted, we still allow our users to, say, charge their iPhone and sync with iTunes. So, because the USB port's still on. So if you had a different kind of USB vulnerability that wasn't involved in mounting the drive, it's probably still a risk with that method. Okay, underneath.
Since you were mentioning Flash, Adobe just a couple hours ago admitted there's a horrible vulnerability in yesterday's update.
I was gonna say, didn't they update this week? I know my auto packager thing emailed me earlier this week that there was a new Flash out. So. Okay, so everyone at lunch, go uninstall Flash. Adobe has told you that, apparently. So yeah, I'll have to read that. I haven't read that yet. Okay, so I think we're about done. Thank you very much. And